Hi guys, Ramsey here. Welcome to another video. Today we have a very special installment of This Is Not a Top 10, and we're covering one of the 7 fragrance families, which in this case, today's video is going to be on the Chypre, which is actually my favorite category of fragrance. I know I said leather was actually my favorite, but what you'll notice is that a lot of my favorite fragrances are actually leather Chypre. So there's 7 fragrance families, you know, citrus, fougere, oriental, on and on and on. And yes, I will still use the term oriental. For those of you who don't like it, don't use it, but I'm going to use it. So that's that. Okay, so the Chypre family. Now, I did a little bit of research, and I'm going to try to share some of these facts with you that I uncovered. Some of them were actually very interesting, even to me. And then I'll go through some of the Chypres in my collection like normal. But for those of you complaining that my last first impression was not a long enough video for you, I hope you got your seatbelt on, because this is going to be a long video. Again, very important topic to me. Chypres are my favorite fragrance category, and we're going to dive into it. So first, Chypre is pronounced Chypre. And it's basically a fragrance family founded in 1917 by Francois Coty. However, there is evidence that in 1909, Guerlain created the first Chypre. They called it Chypre de Paris. And it was the first modern Chypre that used tree moss and oak moss in the base with modern ingredients, I should say. What I did find interesting is that even though that is officially considered to be the beginning of the Chypre family, either in 1909, if you believe the Guerlain story, or if you believe Francois Coty's Chypre from 1917 was the first Chypre. There is some interesting history that, and by the way, the word Chypre in France literally refers to the island of Cyprus. And there is, what's interesting is a lot of people think that because it's Cyprus, that it has to do with the cypress tree or the cypress wood. It does not. That term has nothing to do with cypress that you would find in perfumery, but it does relate to the island specifically. And I took some notes here. And so there are some fragrance historians that actually believe that, you know, there's some connection with the island of Cyprus and Chypre. And there's some fragrance historians that believe that there is this accord, this Chypre accord, which is basically made up of 3 main ingredients, if you will. There's a citrus top, which is usually bergamot. There's a labdanum mid or base. Labdanum can be in the mid and the base. And then there's normally some sort of moss in the base. Oak moss normally is what you think about. You think of us vintage fragrance heads getting high on oak moss, and we love our moss, and it was a vital component of Chypres. And now that IFRA is regulating, you know, the use of oak moss, it has put a lot of these Chypres at risk. And interestingly enough, there was this, you know, I mentioned Guerlain, I mentioned Coty, and there was this relationship between the two where they constantly fought. The wife of Jacques Guerlain actually loved Coty's work, and so they were like constantly trying to outdo each other. He hated that she liked his work, by the way. But while I was doing this research, some interesting things that I kind of uncovered is that fragrance historians mention that the Chypre accord, the, you know, citrus top, labdanum mid, oak moss base, goes back as far as the 1700s even, and potentially there are some fragrance historians that believe that it's even mentioned as early as Roman times, and that's one of the early connections to the island of Cyprus. There's a Roman connection. Also, one of the most important ingredients in Chypres is that labdanum, which is harvested from the rock rose plant. That material is heavily found on the island of Cyprus. And then the final connection, and by the way, the French named pretty much everything. So when they were naming things, that Chypre connection to the island of Cyprus could have been something that they were thinking about. Also, interestingly enough, I uncovered that the oldest known vestigial perfume workshop on Earth was actually discovered on the island of Cyprus. It's estimated to be over 3,000 years old. And I'm told you can actually visit this specific site. I'll have to look into that some more. But labdanum itself is a very important feature of the Shifra DNA, and that's probably why it initially got its name. Now, labdanum has been harvested since biblical times. It's actually used to treat wounds historically. I actually bought some long ago on Amazon. It looks like this putty type stuff, and it's real sticky, but it smelled amazing. The smell, I talked about it on Eugene's stream once. The smell was so good that you could actually, I almost feel like you could create a perfume almost out of labdanum, which I feel like one perfumer did. I'll talk about that here in a minute. But the flower itself looks like this poppy type flower, and it's like this honeyed resinous type smell. But the Shifra is, it's very malleable, because if you take a Shifra and you make it fruity, like I'll give you an example of a very popular modern fruity Shifra. This is Aventus. Now, Aventus is a very modern fruity Shifra. It's got the pineapple accord. It has the moss in the base. It also, by the way, I should mention that a couple other ingredients that you normally see along with the bergamot, the labdanum, and the oak moss is patchouli and rose. And there is patchouli and rose in this, by the way. And I think that's just because historically they've blended so well, you know, with that accord. Now, there's big talk about reformulation with this, and there's people who are obsessed with batch codes on Aventus. What really started to fascinate me as I kind of really dug into this is IFRA banned oak moss to 0.1% of the formula starting in 2014. Well, 2014 the law was passed, 2015 it was implemented. This is actually a 2014 bottle of Aventus, and you can see I use this entire bottle. I'm one of the few, we'll say, fragrance connoisseurs that actually likes Aventus, but I love Shifra, so it makes sense. And this is a 2014 batch. I don't know if you'll be able to see the batch code with the reflection, but there it is. You might be able to see it there. It's the 14 right there signifies the batch code. So, you know, it's interesting that people like these older batches, because I think the loss of oak moss really killed this fragrance, and that's why people were so into the old ones, and me too. I love the older fragrances. And I think Creed just didn't want to spend the money to maybe use the oak moss in a way that there is a process that Duchaufour and Wasser perfected, and they can actually extract the atronal and chlorotronol, which is the bad parts of the oak moss that can give people a rash, apparently. It's a very expensive process. Some people think it even changes the smell of the oak moss, but at least they could still use it in a way that would allow them to keep the formula intact. I'll talk about more of these type of fragrances, you know, as we go on, but this is a fruity Shifra, and one of the most famous Shifras is a fruity Shifra, Mitsouku. This has peach, you know, this has pineapple. They're both Shifras though. But what's interesting is, historically, Shifras were women's fragrances. You know, you think about a fragrance like Rochas Femme. I'm going to jump around a little bit. I usually don't, but I'm going to do that today because this is such an important video. So you think about a fragrance like Rochas Femme. This is a Edmund Rudnitska formula, and it's femme for women. Same for Mitsouku. But what's interesting about it, so historically Shifras were for women. Fougère was for men. But, you know, if you go back hundreds of years, if you look even before, we're talking, you know, in the 1900s, these type of ideals were set in place. But if you go back even further to the 17 and 1800s, it was exactly the opposite. Lavender was considered a feminine flower, not a masculine flower. Rose was considered a masculine flower. So this intertwining of gender in perfumery has been going on for a long time. And then you take into account that, you know, historically these were women's perfumes, but now you have the growth of these niche houses that come in and say, we're not even going to assign to gender. We're going to create something that's completely unisex. Like this is a modern Shifra from Papillon called Salome that maybe historically would be feminine, but men now are wearing and appreciating the Shifra Accord, which I absolutely love. Like I said, it's my favorite. So there's a lot that, you know, has kind of gone into this, and you can steer Shifras to different types. I mentioned fruity Shifras. Bel Ami is my favorite fragrance of all time. This is a leather Shifra. If you use like a lot of iris, and if you use, you know, castoreum and saffroline, you can create this leather accord. You can create a green Shifra. This is Chanel number 19. This is my favorite green fragrance. And this is targeted towards women. The 70s were big on green Shifras. If you put, you know, Lily of the Valley and Galbanum and Artemisia and stuff like that, that mixes well, you can create a green Shifra. So, you know, even though the structure is made up of the three main parts that I talked about, you can steer it however way, you know, the perfumer wants. There's a lot of creativity, I should say, that can go into this. The other thing I found interesting is going back to ancient Greek mythology, or ancient mythology, I should say. Aphrodite was known to sleep on a bed of moss, which the moss is the Shifra fragrance, the mossiness. There's this allure of, you know, mysteriousness to this fragrance category, which is why I love it so much. I love the mysteriousness, the mossiness, the dirtiness. The dirty Shifras are actually my favorite. I'm wearing my favorite. By the way, I should give it a spritz. I'm going to do this off camera so you can't see what I'm wearing. But if you know what my favorite Shifra is, I will, hopefully I didn't just show it, but I will let you guys know here at the very end of the video. Oh my God, it's so good. Long story short is there's been a lot of changes in the Shifra world because of what's been going on with oak moss and how vital of a component it is. You'll see oak moss listed on the box as Avenia prunastri, I believe. They put it in Latin for whatever reason. But the total, whether it's tree moss or whether it's oak moss or whatever, you know, the combination could be now, since IFRA restricted it, those two totals can no longer be more than 0.1% in the formula, which is not very much. And a lot of these old fragrances used oak moss as a fixative. So even if it wasn't there for the smell, it was there for, you know, the ability to fixate the fragrance to you and make it longer lasting. And you know, some people, once the IFRA guidelines got passed down, they just discontinued their fragrance altogether. They didn't want their formula ruined. Some people tried to go through the more expensive process of extracting the oak moss, you know, from, or the atronol and chlorotronol from the oak moss. Like a good example of that is Roja's Shifra Extraordinaire. This is supposed to be an oak moss or a Shifra that uses no oak moss. So he was trying to do like a study in creating a Shifra without using oak moss, just to prove it could be done. So, you know, it's on the minds of perfumers, and there's even a chemical compound called Evernil, which can be used in place of real oak moss. So that's kind of what I uncovered as a backstory. There's obviously a lot more to this. This is just a very high-level overview, but learning about the Cistus labdanum, you know, and the oak moss and the rock roses in the island of Cyprus and how it's all connected was very interesting. I just wanted to kind of share that with you. So let's go through some of these like we normally do in my videos. We are going to start with the most famous Shifra of all time, and probably one of the greatest creations, one of the top 5 perfume creations of all time, and it's Mitsouku. I showed it earlier, but this was created in 1919. This was created by Jacques Guerlain, one of my favorite Jacques Guerlain creations, along with Shalimar. But this is a fruity Shifra, and it's got the bergamot and citrus in the top, but it has that peach note that I love wearing this too, by the way. This is the Eau de Parfum, and it does last a long, long time on me. There's beautiful florals in this as well. There's a vetiver note in the base. I don't think this is feminine. I think it's completely unisex nowadays. But the fact that it is, you know, marketed towards women, historically men would never try something like this. But this is a beautiful example of a Chypre. In fact, Pierre Bourdon, in one of his videos that I saw recently, said that this was his favorite fragrance of all time. And that's very telling from a nose like him. So this is number one. Number two is another Guerlain that I wanted to share with you guys, and it is Derby. This is a beautiful masculine Chypre. This has a leather accord in it, but you'll notice the notes when you go look at the main accords, like if you just pull up Fragrantica. I know Fragrantica is not the end-all be-all, but you'll notice a lot of the same theme with these. You know, they're mossy, they're earthy, they're leathery, and that's because of the structure of how it's created. So this has Artemisia, bergamot, mint in the top. It's got a little bit of a floral heart with a beautiful nutmeg flower accord, and then it has that oak moss and labdanum to create that leather note in this, which sometimes you kind of have to search for, but I actually, I love wearing this. This is such a power fragrance to me, and Chypres kind of do that. You know, they're not the compliment monsters. They're not for people who, you know, go around wanting compliments. Although Aventus was created as in a way that garners compliments, most Chypres historically do not. Most Chypres are, you know, they're heavy, they're earthy, they're mossy, and this is exactly that. This is very masculine to me. Even though it's a Chypre, it's very masculine. I love this fragrance. I'm so happy to have a bottle, and it is discontinued. So if you can find Derby, one of the greatest masculines of all time. And then a modern Chypre that Luca Turin gave five stars to. He actually said this is one of the best modern Chypres he's ever run across, and this is Amouage Fate Woman. Now, if you look at the comparisons to this, it's compared to a couple Oriental fragrances. Like it's compared to Estee Lauder's Youth Dew, and it's compared to Opium by YSL from 1977. But what they've done is they have created a little bit of an accord. Look at the beautiful bottle too, with the Swarovski crystal, just gorgeous presentation. And this is a vintage non-magnetic cap, by the way. I have smelled both. They're both nice, but the vintage is amazing. And it does have the bergamot top. It has the labdanum in the mid, and it has the oak moss and castoreum and leather and patchouli in the base with this awesome incense note. So it feels like you're wearing a fragrance like Opium that's an Oriental, but this is a proper Chypre by Amouage done, and this is way better than the men's version, by the way. The men's version is good if you like cumin. But it's nowhere near this. This is the only full bottle from the women's line that I own, Fate. Very happy to have it. And then this one is for the connoisseurs. This is made by a brand called Rogue, which I actually really enjoy their work. This is made by a guy named Manny Cross, and he created this in 2012, I believe. The idea with this fragrance is it's supposed to smell similar to Coty's original Chypre, but with a little bit of a twist, because he uses this Kaffir lime note, which Kaffir lime is used a lot apparently in Indian foods. I think he's part Indian, if I'm not mistaken. And so it's used a lot in, you know, Indian cuisine. So there's this Kaffir lime in the base that's substituted for, let's say, the bergamot. There may still be bergamot mixed with it, but it's a fragrance called Shifra Siam, and it's from the house of Rogue Perfumery. Now, Rogue, they're called Rogue because they do not follow IFRA's guidelines. In fact, they flaunt the fact they don't follow IFRA's guidelines. And look at what real oak moss does to the color. Look at that color. And it's so good, I actually got a backup bottle. Actually, I bought this one first. And then when I realized what it is, I instantly went out and bought the bigger bottle. So I'm so glad to have a backup. Oh, it's so good. For a Shifra lover, if you want to smell real oak moss, this and there's another one called Mousse Illuminé from the same house. Beautiful oak overdose of oak moss. Fantastic mossy fragrances. And for a self-trained perfumer, now he was a chef, so I think he understands dosages. You know, he understands, you know, a proper mixing of materials. But someone self-taught it, someone that self-taught created this is so impressive. And just goes to show how important the quality of the ingredients are. You know, you could be the best chef in the world, but if you're working with, you know, bottom tier ingredients, you're not going to create something amazing. And this is amazing. This is for the real connoisseurs, in my opinion. But you have to love Shifra. It's a Shifra through and through. I mean, they put it in the name even. To put Shifra in the name is a little bit risky sometimes, I think. But God, it's so good. This is amazing stuff. You can buy his stuff on Etsy, I believe. I think he sells on Etsy, but he's still kind of, and now he might be on Lucky Scent too. His stuff is becoming a little bit easier to find now, but I'm so happy to have this. So happy to have two. And just the green from the real oak moss. I mean, it's amazing what it does to the formula. Okay, next. Next is one of my favorite animalic leather castoreum Shifras, and it's from the house of Piguet. It's called Bandit. And this is the EDT. This is a little bit of an older bottle. And this is an amazing creation. It came out in 1944. Germaine Cellier created this. I don't know her work at all, honestly. And it's so unique, you know, and the leather, the smoke, there's this smoke accord in this. But the leather is so rough. It's you know, it's something that you would I think this was supposed to be, you know, a way to cut through the smoke in a speakeasy, or, you know, in the 1940s. There's a crazy coconut note in the base again. We were just talking about coconut showing up in vintage fragrances. I don't get coconut at all, but there's bergamot, artemisia, galbanum, aldehydes in the top. And then you've got a beautiful floral heart, carnation, jasmine, violet, rose, tuberose, and then, you know, the oak moss and the leather in the base. And just because if you go on Fragrantica and you look at the notes, don't think because, you know, labdanum does not show up as a note that this is not a Shifra, because I guarantee you that they're using, you know, a combination of civet, labdanum, castoreum to create this leather accord in here. And just a fantastic leather fragrances. If you're a leather lover or a Shifra lover, this is a must smell just for historical purposes. Speaking of must smells, this is my scent of the day. I'm wearing my favorite Shifra today for the video. And then I just want to talk about Aventus a little bit. I know I touched on it earlier. I have 4 bottles of this, 2014, which I barely have any left. I've got a 2015, 2016, and 2017 batch, and then I stopped. I stopped buying them because I bought a 2018 and I was so disappointed that I just couldn't continue. I had to boycott. It. But we now know the name of the perfumer thanks to the Ghost Perfumer book. If you haven't read that, check it out. But this is a great, you know, way to see. This is a Shifra construction, and again, we talked about it being for women, but creating that accord for men. And I love the mossiness underneath it all. So even though it's fruity and I wear this in the summer, it has depth, and that's, I think, what catches people's attention. There is patchouli in this. By the way, I should mention one other thing while I'm thinking about it. I read or heard that now that perfumers can't really use oak moss, they can sometimes use an accord of patchouli and vetiver combined in the base to try to create that oak moss accord. And there's a fragrance I'll show you later on, Roja's Vetiver, that I think does exactly that. He's the king of Chypres, by the way. There's a ton of his fragrances in this video. I didn't grab them all because it would have been complete overkill to show all of the Chypres that I have from him, but I'm showing you a very good number here. And then next is another masculine Chypre, but from 50 years ago, 1966, and it's made by Bernard Chant, and this is Aramis by Aramis, and this is the cologne version before they did the EDT. If you can find the ones that say cologne, get it. It's more true to the original formula. God, this is one of my favorite leathers. And I don't think I included it in my leather fragrance list. I could do a whole second list of leather fragrances not in that original leather list. I love leather so much. But what I'm coming to realize is I love leather Chypres, is what I really love. And I guess most leather fragrances are potentially created by that Chypre accord. But this is a leather Chypre like no other. Fragrantica says woody Chypre. You know, there's all different ways to classify this. But it's got the bergamot, it's got the myrrh and artemisia aldehydes in the top, and then it has cardamom, sage, patchouli, jasmine, orris, that orris root to go with the leather, that powdery orris. I'm finding I really love fragrances that mix those two notes apparently. And then there's that leather created by the labdanum and oak moss and vetiver, sandalwood, musk, amber in the base. This is such a great fragrance. It's such a shame that perfume lovers nowadays will talk about, you know, a $500, $600, $700, $800, $900 niche fragrance, but they won't talk about this. I mean, you know, before, if you're newer in the perfume game, before you go buy, you know, Manhattan by Roja Dove or whatever it is, get your nose on this. I mean, this is the kind of stuff you should be smelling to understand, you know, how we got here and understand accords. And this is such a great leather Chypre to study, in my opinion. And then there is another woody floral Chypre from the house of Alain Delon called Iquitos. And if you look at the bottle, it's supposed to be almost like a snake head coming out of the jungle. Again, the jungle where there's a lot of moss at you, so you can kind of see, and the greenness of the bottle represents that oak moss accord. And the reason that this is such a I would say not hidden gem, but hot commodity among collectors like myself. I actually have 2 bottles of this. I love it so much. This is a 50 ml splash, and this is a 100 ml spray tester. But the reason that this is so sought after is because this came out in 1987 when they could still use the real oak moss accord. If they wanted to put 10-20% oak moss in this, they could. And so if you're going to be a big niche brand, even if you are a Roja Dove that sells your stuff for $1,000, you can't make the base with oak moss like this. So they're at a drastic disadvantage if they want to follow IFRA, unless they want to thumb their nose at IFRA and say, forget you, I'm not going to do it, you know, if they're going to go this route. But then they cut out such a big percentage of the population that they could sell to. They won't be able to sell to people in Europe, you know, or stuff like that. And so they have to follow those guidelines if they want to be in Macy's and Saks and all that stuff. So that's why these type of fragrances are so sought after, is even if you're going to charge someone $1,000, you cannot do what these fragrances did. And that is, you know, that's why these are such a gem. And even if you just get a little decant from somebody, smell this. It is the most amazing mixture of this powdery floral with this animalic, with this earthy tone underneath from the oak moss and labdanum. And the jasmine in this is out of this world. Even Rich Mitch loves this fragrance for the jasmine, and he hates jasmine. Okay, now we're going to jump to a woman's targeted Chypre from Estee Lauder called Knowing. And I've gotten a request to do a full review on this. I absolutely will. There was also somebody who corrected me I mentioned that Fragrantica says Jean Carlio is the perfumer of this, and apparently he's not. Someone corrected me and said it was someone else. I can't remember who. But this also came out in 1988. This also came out in the time where they could use big oak moss in the base. And this fragrance is chocked full of notes. I mean, there's aldehydes, mimosa, rose, coriander, plum, tuberose, and melon in the top. So it's got that fruity type vibe like something like Aventus, but then it goes into this earthy, rooty patchouli with cardamom and cedar and bay leaf, orris, jasmine, lily of the valley, oak moss, patchouli, civet, spices, vetiver, sandalwood, amber, orris, musk. You can see these are complicated fragrances. Shifras are usually very complicated to create and to create well. And the fact that this type of perfumery is sitting on the shelf for under $100, again, I'll just use Roja as an example because he's such an overpriced house. He's great. He is inspired by great fragrances, but why pay $1,000 for an inspiration when you can go get the original with the actual quality ingredients? If you've done all this and then you want to go splurge on the big stuff, do it. But to initially get there, to get your nose to understand what you're smelling, to understand the accords and the notes and the the triangle of what creates a Shifra and how it gets there, and to really enjoy that, why not go drop $60 on a bottle of this? I mean, you can't spend your money better, honestly. And then the other one, the next one from the house of Estee Lauder, same house, is even better, in my opinion. Knowing is great, but this is my love. This is my proper, it's not my scent of the day. It's not my favorite classic Shifra, but it's my favorite proper leather Shifra, and it's Azuree. This fragrance is unbelievable. Oh my God. If you want oak moss, seriously, if you want oak moss and castoreum and leather, and you want to smell what a real leather Shifra fragrance smelled like, get this. This came out in 1969. It was created by Bernard Chant, the same person who created Aramis for men. So this came out 3 years later, and I love them both. I will even say equally. But for some reason, there's something about this. And look at the color of the juice. There's something about this that, and I can't believe this is targeted towards women. I mean, my mind just, it boggles the mind. Knocks you off your chair that women wore this. This is so dirty, so animalic, so leathery. It's almost like if you took a mixture of a heavy animalic Shifra and mixed like Bandit, for example, and mixed it with more of a classic Shifra structure. Oh God, it's so good. It's so good. I can't, this is high perfumery right here. And it goes for it nowadays. If you want a sealed bottle of this, you're going to spend hundreds. But to me, I mean, this is right up there with the MDCIs, the Creeds, the MFKs, the Roja Doves, you name a high level brand, and this is right up there with it. But no one talks about this. No one talks about this. I never see anyone talk about this. Maybe they do, but I never see anyone talk about this. This is Azuree. Get the one with this gold that goes down to here. There's one where the gold is not here, and I hear it's a different formulation. If you can get the one where the gold goes down to here, you're guaranteed to basically get an amazing fragrance. And I'm not hyping it up. It's just my opinion. Now, if you like that style, but you want something more modern, this is a modern Shifra by Francesca Bianchi, and it's called Etruscan Water. So these are kind of two peas in a pod. This amps up the citrus. She still tries to make it a little bit earthy and dirty and mossy in her own way, but she doesn't succeed to my nose. This was a failed blind buy. I probably will not buy anything else from the house because I would much rather wear this than this, if you get what I'm saying. So if you can't get this and you want kind of a shadow of what this is, you can go for this. but just understand that it is not up to par, in my opinion. It smells a little bit like there's just too much synthetic materials in here. Again, call me crazy. My channel, my opinion, and I will shoot straight from the hip because I have no reason to say otherwise. I paid for all these with my own money. None of these were sent to me for review, and you hear me say that on a lot of videos. It's very important to me. My reputation is probably the most important thing in doing these videos with you guys because of what else I see going on in Fragcom. You know, the reviews for money, for bottles, for, you know, buying views and likes, and I don't care about any of that. I don't care about how many subscribers I have. I just want to share my thoughts and my love of perfumery. And you know, while this is good and it's a Shifra, it's not Azuree good, if you get what I'm saying. Okay, now we're gonna move on to the other side of the table, and we're gonna start with an absolutely amazing Shifra, one of my favorite Shifras of all time. I really had to think about whether I want to wear this or my scent of the day for it literally just blew me. It blew my mind just smelling that right there. The scent of the day is so good. It'll come at the end of the video, but this is the one I almost wore because I love it so much, and it is a Shifra. It even has Shifra in the name. It's MDCI's Shifra Palatin. And Shifra Palatin is a Bernard Duchaufour creation. Bertrand Duchaufour, sorry. And it's basically classified as a fruity Shifra, but in my opinion, this is a shapeshifter. It is a Shifra, definitely. You can tell from the construction. It's got the citruses in the top, but he uses clementine instead of bergamot. There's also a very beautiful plum and iris and rose, but then the base is heavy balsams, almost like an amber fragrance. It's got Tolu balsam, oak moss, castoreum, benzoin, vanilla, leather, immortelle, styrax, costus, which used to give off this, costus is used to give off this almost like this stink type smell. I heard Koros used to have a lot of costus in it, but this is so good. I mean, I wish I had more than a 30 ml of this. This is one I wish I had a full bottle of that I don't. I mean, my 30 ml is a lot of juice when you have a collection my size, but still, it's still not a full bottle. I wish I had a full bottle of this. One of my favorite Shifras. I love wearing this. Every time I wear it, I get different facets of this. Different weather brings out different facets of this. The labdanum is listed in the top here as well, which is interesting. It's a beautiful composition. Duchaufour is just a master, and you know, he's always known for his incense. Everyone talks about his incense, and rightly so. But this creation, for me, is, you know, right up there with Jubilation 25 because of the creativity that it garners. So, Shifra Palatin, if you've never smelled it, one of my favorites, because there is this ambery oriental feel, but there's also that earthiness of a Shifra. The dichotomy is just mind-blowing. Okay, now I have a special vintage fragrance to show you guys, never seen before on my channel. This is a fragrance that if you look it up in Fragrantica, you will notice it says a different name than what's listed on the bottle because there was a name change. It was created in 1993 by Dominique Pressas, and it's Basara. Well, my bottle's Basara. Fragrantica says Basala because it was initially Basara in the first edition, and then they changed it to Basala. But this is a Shifra that employs some fougere elements to me, if that makes sense. And what I mean by that is there's lavender in the top. There's also fir balsams in the mid. But it's definitely a Shifra structure. It's got the bergamot. It's a little bit fruity in the top as well. So this fragrance is such a mixture. Almost like I said, that Jill Sanders Feeling Man is this crazy mixture of, you know, Drakkar Noir with this, you know, raspberry, strawberry note. This also has this feeling of being a little bit like it's so good. And there's a coconut note in the base again, which snuck in. I have no idea why, but the notes are lavender, clary sage, basil, rosemary. There's fruity notes, artemisia, bergamot, neroli, and then there's caraway, rose, fir, cinnamon, carnation, and jasmine. And then in the base, there's leather, labdanum, cedar, oak moss, amber, patchouli, musk, and coconut. I never get a coconut note in any of these 80s fragrances or 90s fragrances where there's this random coconut note stuck into the base. But I will tell you that this is a unicorn right now. It's a unicorn. It goes for big money. This is a 50 ml half full, and I paid a lot for this to have it. And I'm glad I did, because this is a fantastic example of a Shifra. And Shiseido used to make these fragrances, like when they made Féminité du Bois in the bottle that's different from the Serge Lutens bottle. And they just made, you just want to keep smelling it, you know, it's addictive in a way, but I love that fragrance. And then the green fragrance example I showed you guys yesterday, this is Chanel number 19, my favorite green fragrance. This is a recharge bottle, that's why there's no cap. So it's a tester too, demonstration, says right there. But you can kind of see Chanel's etched batch code right there as well. But this is a revelation for green fragrances. Apparently, they used to take the galbanum from Iran. They used to use Iranian galbanum in the old days. This came out in 1970, 1 year before Coco Chanel died. Henri Robert created this. And it is, I mean, if you're a green fragrance lover, this is the reason I never bought Synthetic Jungle. Because, you know, this is, I don't know how you improve on this. Galbanum, hyacinth, bergamot, neroli in the top, iris, I love iris, I'll do an iris video soon, orris, rose, lily of the valley, narcissus, jasmine, and ylang, and then oak moss, vetiver, leather, cedar, musk, sandalwood. Even though this is targeted for women, please guys, take my advice. If you're gonna buy any of the women targeted fragrances, this, Azuree, or number 19, or Knowing, go out and try these women targeted Shifras. They are amazing. And also Fate Woman. Amazing. Do not overlook those just because you're a male. I'm telling you. It's a mistake that I wish I would have corrected 5 years ago. You know, instead of 5 years ago, I never would have worn this, ever. I would have said, what are you, crazy? Number 19? No way. 5, 6 years ago? No. Now that I've kind of realized what you're missing, you miss out on half of the fragrances if you don't look at these. And then my favorite, one of my favorite masculine Shifras is the almighty Antaeus, like Darth Vader walking up. Dun, 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 dun. Look at that bottle, just gorgeous. And this is the vintage with the silver cap, where the EDT is above the Chanel. It is, it's so good. It's got this myrrh note, and then it just heads right into this beautiful rose. You know, there is the bergamot, lime, and Amalfi lemon in the top with coriander, which I love. And then there's that oak moss, castoreum, French labdanum, and patchouli. I don't know how else you could make, I don't know how you could improve on this Shifra for men. It's one of my absolute favorites to wear too. It wears masculine. And I love all day the whiffs you get from it. I love the impression. I love how it makes me feel. This and Cuir de Russie, the vintage that I have, and Le Lion are my favorite Chanels. And then, if you love this fragrance, by the way, if you love Antaeus and you want something similar, one Shifra fragrance that I have in my collection, again, another one you guys have not seen, is a fragrance called Maxim's Pour Homme. Maxim is a restaurant in Paris, you know, famous perfumers, and, you know, people like Mr. Dior would eat there. And this is created, what's interesting about this is this came out in 1988, and it was created by Dominique Ropion. So people will pay $1,600 for 100 ml of the night, right? But they won't spend 60 bucks on this. And I get just as much joy out of wearing this. It's nothing like the night, but I'm just using it as an example because Dominique Ropion's name is so sought after nowadays. You know, he's one of the top perfumers in the game. And, you know, this is a very elegant sheep. Just like I think Antaeus is elegant, even though it's rough and tumble, this does the same thing, but it amps up the florals. So I told you earlier that rose and patchouli mix very well in a Chypre. This takes that rose note and amps it up and adds a beautiful note of clove in this. And there's an old school carnation note in this as well. Beautiful Chypre, beautiful. And it's got a little bit of that animalic bite in the base. I love this fragrance. I actually had to buy a backup bottle. I like it so much. So anytime you see me with 2 bottles, those are winners. And then next is a fragrance that was created in the late 70s, 1978, by master perfumer Carlos Benaim. I love his work. I love what he did for music for a while. You know, I love what he did with Dunhill Icon. Fantastic. Didn't care for the Dawn as much, though, but this is Polo Green. And this is a Warner version, which is pre-Cosmere. Whoops. Let's put it the right way, Ramsey. I don't know if you can see that. It says Warner right there in the middle. So this is, Cosmere bought the distribution rights, and it says cologne spray. So that's how you know it's very old. This bottle's probably older than I am. Oh, God. Just from the nozzle. It's, this is a Chypre, obviously, or it wouldn't be on the list. Bergamot in the top, pine. It adds this beautiful note of pine, and then leather with the labdanum to create that leather accord, and it adds this tobacco in the base with the oak moss, with all the other lovely ingredients: patchouli, cedar, vetiver, musk, carnation. There's even a chamomile note in this, which I look for sometimes and can't find it. Oh God, this is the only way I know how to describe this is how a man should smell. That's it. This is what a man should smell like. They should not smell like bubblegum. They should not smell like caramel. And they should not smell like toffee or, you know, hazelnut even. I don't care for the note of hazelnut. But you know what I mean. This is what a man should smell like. I love this fragrance. I have a Cosmere backup. I didn't grab it just because it's getting too hard to bring all this stuff. And then, I mentioned this one earlier as well. This is Edmond Rudnitska's Rochas Femme, which he plays around with the accord of cumin for the first time in this fragrance. He then perfects the note of cumin in Eau de Hermes, in my opinion. But this has a beautiful plum note. So, Mitsouku has peach, and this has a beautiful plum note. And so it's still a fruity Chypre. There's also peach and apricot, by the way, but the plum really stands out to me. And then there's Brazilian rosewood. Then you hit the citrus, bergamot, and lemon in the top. And then the mid has clove, which he is also a master at using. Carnation, ylang ylang, rosemary, rose, iris, jasmine, oak moss, leather, benzoin, amber, patchouli, musk, vanilla. Top 5 Chypre, for sure. For me, top 5 Chypre. No doubt I would put it up there with, or I would put Chypre Palatin up there with this, and Mitsouku, and, you know, a couple of, and I'm talking classic Chypres, not the leather Chypres. Those I would have to put in a separate category. I don't know how I would do a top 5 Chypre list, because I love them all, but if you are a student of perfumery, you have to have this. It is a must to smell and understand what Rudnitska did here. He was also, Pierre Bourdon mentioned in the video that he did that Rudnitska was a fan of keeping his formulas succinct with less notes, because if there was 100 notes, it's harder to pick stuff out. But if you do simpler formulas, even though it may not be complex, it's easier to smell the cinnamon, you know, the rosemary, the iris, the clove, the patchouli. God. what a fragrance. And this is the Parfum De Toilette, I should mention, which is a term that a lot of fragrance houses used to use before eau de parfum. So you can see it right there. It says Parfum De Toilette. If you ever buy Parfum De Toilette from a house like Rochas or Guerlain, you're buying an older, you know it's an older formula because they stopped using that term in the late 80s, early 90s at the earliest. So if you are, you know, getting a Parfum De Toilette, you know it's vintage. God, so good. And then I mentioned this fragrance earlier, but I have to talk about it again. It is my favorite fragrance. I think I can say that. My favorite fragrance, and it's Bel Ami. This is a leather Chypre, obviously, and copied many times. Pure Distance M, which I also have and didn't grab because it would be too much, takes inspiration from this. Roja's Fetish, which is also a Chypre, takes inspiration from this. Fetish Pour Homme, I should say. I'll show that here in a minute. But Bel Ami is just the perfect fragrance for me because it has these beautiful citrus notes in the top, but it also has this very woody, oh God, the oiliness of the leather is just amazing. Apparently it means like good friend or, you know, something like that, but it was the name of a famous author, American author's boat. His yacht was named Bel Ami, and that's apparently where Hermes got the idea. But it has this lovely cardamom note, but the leather in this is outstanding, bar none. Actually, this is one of the few times that, while the vintage is amazing, and I'm so glad to have this, thank you Amouage, by the way, for the original shaker bottle. This is what the original bottle looked like. The first reformulation that comes in this bottle is actually my favorite. They've refined it. They perfected it, in my opinion, here. And I don't know if this is Jean-Claude Alain's reform. There's also this ridiculous coconut note in the base in this. There's no coconut in this. But the leather, oak moss, labdanum styrax, vetiver, amber, vanilla, patchouli in the mid. My God, perfect fragrance. And then I want to talk about some Rojas. The first I want to talk about is oud, one of his oud fragrances that's actually a Chypre by design, and it's called Musk Oud. He always does Ayud because he says that's how they say it in the Middle East, but Musk Ayud is a Chypre fragrance with the oud addition and this beautiful leathery, you know, this sticky, leathery. He loves using the note of ambrette, by the way. But this just shows that Chypres can be brought into the 21st century and even adapt. I mentioned fruity Chypres, I mentioned floral Chypres, I mentioned green Chypres. Here's an oud Chypre. I just wanted to show it to you because I wanted you to see that, you know, Roja's the master of Chypre, obviously. That is a no-brainer, right? But the fact that it is such a malleable structure that even with the oud craze, he was able to take that Chypre blueprint and create something amazing like this just goes to show why Chypres are so loved. He also did it with Majestic Ayud. This is discontinued. He claims this is supposed to be a full-on oud. It's not. In my opinion, it's not. He says it's supposed to be like an in-your-face oud. It's got nothing on the Bortnikovs or the Desitas. There may be real oud in this. I have no idea. But this is one that if you like Western ouds, like, for example, Royal Oud by Creed, check out Majestic Oud by Roja. You might like it. It's not very skanky at all, in my opinion. Animalic is like the third note on Fragrantica. I disagree with that. And then, Shifra Extraordinaire. I mentioned this fragrance. This is a ridiculous fragrance to me, by the way. It's like a $2,000 Shifra. And the whole idea is he is supposed to create like an experiment where you're going to create a Shifra and not use any oak moss. Fine, but why is it $2,000? I mean, it doesn't make any sense to me at all. And this is one of the biggest disappointments from the House of Roja to me, Shifra Extraordinaire. I mean, I'm glad to try it. I'm glad to say I have a little bit and can try it. But so overpriced. I mean, I don't know if I would wear this if you gave it to me for $100, a full bottle, to be honest with you. It's just not, it's not what a Shifra should be. He has one coming up that is what a Shifra should be. But this one, it's bergamot, aldehydes in the top, peach, lang, tuberose, cassia, geranium, rose de mai, heliotrope, violet, plum, jasmine, orange blossom, labdanum, oak moss, civet, leather, orris, cedar, benzoin, tonka, musk, clove, cumin, amber, sandalwood, patchouli, vanilla, styrax. Now, oak moss is credited as a note in Fragrantica, but I saw an interview with him that he claims what makes this extraordinary is there was supposed to be no oak moss used. So it's a Shifra without any oak moss, which, how is it a Shifra? I don't know. Or maybe they use the oak moss distillation I was telling you about that's very expensive, where they remove the ingredients. I don't know. But if you're a woman, I think this would smell great on you. If you can just blow $2,000 on a bottle and not blink, go for it. If you like a clean Shifra, there's nothing dirty about this. Not like my favorites. The one I'm about to show you, very dirty, and my scent of the day. So good. And then the one that, you know, is his creation, his Shifra creation that he claims to wear. It's called Haute Luxe. It's really just called Roja, actually, but it's known now as Haute Luxe. And this is one of the best labdanum fragrances for me. And he loves labdanum, obviously, and I don't blame him. I love labdanum too, but I don't love it enough to pay $3,500 for 100 ml of this. This is just labdanum and oak moss bomb. I mean, that's literally what it is. It's a labdanum oak moss bomb with some other stuff around the edges, like benzoin for warmth, and, you know, they list a floral. He claims, you know, he uses real rose de mai and jasmine from grass that costs all this money. And yeah, this, I mean, if you want to smell one of the best labdanum fragrances, this and Le Lion are right there. But Le Lion, you can get 100 ml. I'm sorry, you can get 200 ml of Le Lion for $375, right? This is 100 ml for $3,500. Now, I don't know about you guys, but no matter how much money I have, just out of principle, I don't know if I could buy 100 ml for $3,500, but it is a beautiful labdanum and oak moss centric fragrance. If you want to smell real labdanum, this smells the closest to the real sticky labdanum that I got in like a little resin form and smelled once. This is the closest thing to that. But is it worth $3,500? Hell no. And then we're going to move on to some of his bottles. I mentioned this earlier. This is his fetish Parfum, which is inspired heavily by Bel Ami. He claims it's like a improvement on Bel Ami. Not for me. I'll take the original. I enjoy this. Glad to have it. Glad to be able to compare it, but for me, it's Bel Ami. And then, next, I'm going to show you his Vetiver. And I wanted to do that because I mentioned that perfumers can create the base of, you know, losing the ability with big oak moss with this Vetiver and patchouli combo. And they can almost trick your nose into thinking you're smelling oak moss. And as soon as I realized this was a Shifra fragrance, that his Vetiver Parfum Pour Homme is a Shifra fragrance, it hit me that that's what this is. It's a Shifra that has Vetiver amped up in the base. That's really all it is. It's a Shifra. If you love Shifras, you'll like this. It's got the labdanum mid, bergamot top. I mean, it's classic Shifra, which he obviously loves, and I do too. But is it worth $500 for 50 ml? Is the question. Is it worth that? I don't know. I mean, I love wearing it, but I would probably say no. It's not worth $500 for 50 ml. Just, you know, my honest to God opinion. And then next, I'm going to show you another Shifra, which is basically his take on Terre d'Hermes, and it is Roja's Oligarch. Now you'll notice this is an eau de parfum, so you can see the cap is different. The cap is different than the parfums. And this is also a Chypre, obviously, or it wouldn't be on the list. But it's very fresh, it's very citric. There's a lot of interesting notes in this. There is lavender, there's champaca, there's blackcurrant, there's apple, so you can get the feel. It's uplifting. I wear this in the heat. There's a lily note, there's a coconut note, there's a red pepper note, there's juniper berry, but then you get into the base and you get the leather, the labdanum, the patchouli, the oak moss, the violet root. Very interesting Shifra. And you know, once you realize that these are all Shifras, you kind of view them a little bit different because Terre d'Hermes has that dirty orange smell, and this almost creates that dirty, earthy smell like most Shifras do. But he's used the Shifra DNA, you know, to create that dirty, earthy smell using a bunch of other ingredients. And this goes for, I think, $275 or something, or pounds, or I can never remember. So it's not as expensive, but it's not cheap. And so this is the reason I never bought Terre. One of the reasons, that and Dunhill Icon. And then I want to show you one of my favorite dirty animalic Shifras. I showed you a little bit earlier, but let's dive into it. That's Papillon Salome. This is a revelation. If you like my scent of the day coming up, oh God, there's Hyrax in this. There's Hyraceum. There is Civet. There is Jasmine. There's a bunch of cumin in this. If you like Eau de Hermes, if you like my scent of the day, I'm going to show you next. This is a beautiful Shifra. There's bitter orange and bergamot in the top. There's even a tobacco note in this. And then you get to the oak moss, castoreum, cumin. The castoreum and the Hyrax in this is amazing. You have to like the skank. I love this. This is Liz Moore's best work, hands down, in my opinion. And then, to get to the scent of the day, my favorite Shifra, my favorite classic Shifra, because I told you my favorite, you know, leather is Bel Ami. But my favorite classic Shifra is Diaghilev. And Diaghilev ran the Opera House. I forget where. Ballyroos, or I don't know where he ran the Opera House at. But he used to spray his curtains of the opera with Mitsouku. He loved it so much to get the girls into the, you know, into the mindset to perform. And it was inspired, obviously, by Mitsouku, but to me, Diaghilev is a, you know, mixture of these two, Rochas Femme and Mitsouku. And it adds his Roja Dove signature touch, which who knows who the perfumer of this was. You know, whether it was actually Mr. Dove, or whether, as some people speculate, that, you know, he's just almost like a creative director and someone else is creating the fragrance. I would love to know who the perfumer of this is, because this is a masterpiece. Let me read you the notes in this. I will have to try to do a full review. I don't know if I have the words to do full reviews is my problem. But this is cumin, which he amps up the cumin in a lot of his creations. Danger, Pour Homme Parfum, which I love. It's a take on Heritage, amps up that cumin. This amps up the cumin, and it's got bergamot, lemon, tarragon, orange, lime in the top. You get that citrus top. God. Ylang, peach, jasmine, rose, heliotrope, blackcurrant, violet, tuberose. He loves violet. He loves heliotrope. And then oak moss, civet, leather, musk, cloves, patchouli, labdanum, vetiver, benzoin, ambrette, styrax, nutmeg, cedar, vanilla, peru balsam, gaiac wood, sandalwood in the base. It feels like You know, if you've ever been in a room with the door shut and two bodies making love, and, you know, you get that sweat, that funk on the sheets, and the room is all hot and heavy, and this is a very sexual fragrance. It's my favorite. It's my absolute favorite sheaf. I love the dirtiness of it. You have to appreciate the cumin. There's a big cumin dose. It lasts. Projection isn't huge. So this is 8 hours ago. This is, I just sprayed it, obviously, about an hour ago. And it lasts forever. I will smell these tomorrow, hands down. Now, it won't project forever, but the longevity is outrageous, at least on this bottle. Now, I've seen some of the new bottles where his signature right here is different. It's not his signature. It says like Roja Dove in print. I don't know if this has been reformulated. This is an older bottle. And I don't know how to tell the difference, to be honest with you. I don't know what any of these batch codes there mean. But I almost bought a backup of this. But I decided to go for some different things, so I wasn't just doing the same thing over and over again. But I'm so happy to have this. If you're a Shifra lover and you haven't tried these two, these are 2 peas in a pod. Salome, Diaghilev, hands down. My favorite animalic Shifras. So, I hope you've enjoyed this. If you stuck around for an hour, I really do appreciate it. Let me know about more video ideas. I'm really enjoying creating these videos. Thanks for getting my channel to basically 300 subscribers in the first month. It's a real honor. Cheers. Thanks for spending some time with me today. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.